Hello, humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. Tommy Tallarico's dream, the AMICO, was destroyed. Who was making decisions after his removal? Where'd these taxes come from? Are these real suspensions? We're going to delve into all these questions, onto all these internet rumors today, right? And guys, let me tell you this. If you ever need the help of a professional, get it. Get it. You need professional financial advice, you need to talk to a professional. Right? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to give you legal advice, nor you should take legal advice from YouTubers, or you're going to end up like Tommy Tallarico, getting sued for furniture, or one Carl Jobs. You don't want that, right? You don't want that. And I can't give you my professional advice on business because I don't know your situation, right? So this is for information purposes only, for entertainment purposes only. So you can have a chuckle while you're, I don't know, at work, on the freeway, wherever you are. Now, guys, because of what I'm going to talk about here, let me be very specific because these things are actually very delicate, right? And we know that one Tommy has already been taken to court. He was already thrown under the bus once. He was removed. You know, if I was Tommy, I would seek professional help as soon as possible, right? I wouldn't wait. I would not wait. I would have a lawyer right on call because these guys threw me under the bus. And I got sued for furniture that I signed for to make the company better. And they didn't care, right? They just let me go. And now he finds himself, after being away for a couple of years, to come back to this. And we're going to go over it, right? We don't know if these documents are true or not. I can't verify them. I could tell you that they're true or not. They appear to be true, right? These people, you know, the same people that are criticizing him now have gone to the SEC and been successful at certain things, right? Like, remember when they talked about the guy, the Xbox guy that wasn't there anymore, that was being advertised, they had to do, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they inform the SEC and they had to do some sort of change on there on the language because he wasn't working there anymore, right? But because the only one that has been held accountable for any of the mishaps at Intellivision AMICO has been Tommy. That's a reason if I was Tommy, I would have a lawyer on standby because I don't know who I could trust anymore. I mean, whoever's paying the bills, I guess. I don't know. But because of that, I can only make comments on things that are happening on social media, like Reddit, materials that appear online. They appear to be genuine, right? But all I can do is commentary and be speculative and try to entertain you with some edutainment. Okay, I'm not going to make any allegations against individuals or anything like that, nor you should take any of what I'm going to say as me accusing anybody of doing something wrong, right? These are just questions that I have, right? Like based on business, right? If somebody brought this to my attention, I would have questions. Now you have the whole thing with this new Happy Homes here, which gives me a bunch of red flags. But why does it give me red flags? Let me tell you why. Because I don't know if these games, right, if I was an investor in this new company, because guess what? Smell that? I smell investments opportunities everywhere. Investment opportunities everywhere. Now, I would be wary, right, because I don't know what the relationship between everybody is here. And the reason I would be wary is because were these games that they're going to promote on other platforms, were they not developed under Intellivision Entertainment? And if they were, right, if any of these assets were developed under them, does that company hold any rights to these games? I don't know. I'm not a patent lawyer, right? But I'm sure that if you're a member of the old corporation and now you're trying to Phoenix, and I explained the term Phoenix to you before. If I'm trying to Phoenix this new company, to keep on going with these games, I would be like, wait a minute, you developed this under my company. I'm not part of your company or your new company, right? Don't I deserve a slice of that since you did some of the work here? Yeah, absolutely, right? You would think that they've had that goose cooked for a while because, you have to look at what's going on. So let's look at these papers a little closer. and see if they are to be believed, right? So California, as I told you, doesn't mess around. They're suspended for whatever reason, and all these entities here are suspended. In addition to that, you have this one where I find to be the most interesting one, because what it appears to me, and I don't know if this document is true, okay, I think this is an assessment for non-filing. They didn't file anything, and that's why they got assessed $200,000 because of the amount of shares that they have, right? If you're doing, those kind of amounts, right, of shares, that puts you into a higher tier. I don't know specifically what the laws are in Delaware, right? I'm not a lawyer. But if you're looking at, that many shares, it puts you into a higher tier. Now, if you're in a higher tier, then that's probably the tax for that particular, size of company. It's the only thing that I can surmise. And if you are, and if this got assessed, why did it? Why didn't you file taxes? Which is, right? I mean, it's what is it going to cost you? $2,000 to file taxes? Why didn't anybody do that? Right? I mean, that's a real legitimate question. And this didn't happen under Tommy's watch. And this is according to John Alvarado. He wasn't there. So if he wasn't there, right? If he wasn't there, why was this done? Right? Because you're looking at this assessment of $200,000 plus taxes, and it's just unreal. Right? And with this corporation being in void status because it failed to comply with statutory obligations, it probably could have been because they didn't, I don't know, it could be, right? I'm just speculating, I don't know. They didn't file their franchise taxes or their annual report filings. And when that happens, right, in most states, I don't know how it is in Delaware, right, but the Secretary of State can declare your corporation void. And if your corporation loses its legal good standing, it can't legally operate, right? It exposes sometimes, again, I'm not a lawyer, you need to consult with a professional, but it can expose people to personal liabilities, like officers of the company, because you're risking to pierce the corporate veil. What does that mean in layman's terms? Well, the corporation, the limited liability corporation, protects you. That's the whole purpose of it. But if you don't follow the steps, then that veil, that protection goes away, and they can go after you sometimes, depending on the state. Again, that's why you need to contact a lawyer. Now, why this unusual tax assessment? Why is it so high? I would have to believe it's because of this numbers of shares. Right? In this case, the corporation authorized 60 million shares, which is extremely high. And that probably triggered a maximum tax cap. That would be my best guess. Because I believe it's like more than 10 million that go into that, right? But, I don't know for sure. But when you voluntarily authorize that many shares, it's usually structured for venture capital, for crowdfunding, and for large-scale public investment, which we know this company was. Now, with a corporation that takes that kind of tax burden, it's because it expects itself to be a high-revenue startup, like in the, high-tech sector, tech sector, or gaming, in this case, of course, in television. They're looking for, 8-figure investment rounds, which they got, right? And they're targeting revenues in the tens of millions, but that never happened, right? But the failure to pay taxes, number one, we know that they had no substantial sales other than their actual intellectual properties. So what's the other deduction that you can make for something like this that would happen, right? Because we don't know this is true, so I'm not going to say it's true in this case because I don't know these documents to be true. But in a company that was in this position, it could be because it was mismanaged, or the funds, when Tommy was gone, weren't appropriated to the way he would have done them. Because the one thing I know that when Tommy was in charge, they were paying taxes, because look at this. This is, the incorporation date for this was 2022. Right? And those are red flags, right? If you're trying to invest or reinvest in something like this, when somebody tries to sell you on something, you always have to look out for misrepresentation or mismanagement on somebody's part. Are they risk or at the risk of insolvency? Right? How do the prior investors feel? Right? Is there any litigation pending? Why are there no regulatory filings? Right? That's why this corporation's dead. Forget about the AMICO. It ain't happening. Unless somebody's going to come up with this cash and just going to pay it. If nobody wanted to pay for the consoles that were actually going to produce something that may have lost money, do you think somebody's going to come up with 440 grand just for the hell of it? I don't see that happening. Right? I don't see that happening. And now I have to deduce what steps somebody out there is taking that's leaking this kind of information. Right? Why is somebody doing this? My best guess would be that it's an investor that is trying to look for an angle, right? If I had to guess, I don't know, but if I had to guess, it could be an investor that invested a substantial amount of money and he's trying to investigate prior to what happened to the fundraising, right? He's probably looking for audit disclosures, and just assess officer liability, right? Because if you can't get it out of the company, like I said, if the corporate veil is pierced, then people can be held liable. That's why that's why you have to contact a lawyer. That's why if I was Tommy and I knew that these people had thrown me under the bus already, man, I would be lawyered up to the hilt. Because even if you do intend to fix it for now, they could have just, screwed the pooch, and now they left him with all the liability, which is insane. Now, when it comes to this new venture, Happy Home Games, if they haven't worked things out with the prior owners of these IPs, what do you think is going to happen? Right? Because all these things have to be done legally. These transfers of IPs have to be done legally. And I bet you that all those things, when we find out what's going on, as soon as somebody sues, one of the original investors is not happy, we're going to get answers to all these questions, and it's going to get better. All right, humans, I will catch you on the next one. Take care.